As the Clancy tour has been winding to a close, there have been a variety of different cryptic clues and hints which have been dropped, which seem to indicate that the band are teasing something new. Now, many people have jumped on this and assumed that what they're teasing is a double album, confirmation of the double album theory. Perhaps the next album we're getting is going to be called Inferno. It's going to close out the story. It's going to be 11 tracks long, and the names of all these 11 tracks are slowly being revealed over time. Perhaps that is the case, and if it were, I would not be entirely shocked. However, I am not fully convinced, and in fact, I don't believe that the evidence which we have for that is very conclusive. It seems to be based upon one hypothetical leading to another hypothetical, which when you get down to its core is just a hypothetical itself. So a train of hypotheticals then led us to the conclusion that what they are teasing is the double album, and the next installment of which will be coming out very shortly. Now, two caveats to this dismissal of this theory. One, while I'm not fully convinced that we're getting a new album anytime sooner than we normally would from the band, or that the end of the Clancy story is going to come in the form of a whole album, I do think we will at least get an EP or a song or two, and definitely more videos. At least one more video. Now, I wouldn't be shocked, as I mentioned a second ago, if we did get another album. I do think there are a lot of reasons why that makes sense. Some of the evidence for that is very compelling, but I'm still very far from convinced that we're getting another album now. That when this tour ends, what they will release is a whole new album. I do agree that they are teasing something, and it is probably something very important. But one example of something important which they could be teasing, and which naturally is on its way anyway, is the anniversary of Blurryface. Now, some have argued and theorized that the way they're going to celebrate this anniversary, this 10-year anniversary of Blurryface, is by releasing the end of the story, which started with Blurryface. And that may be so. And that, again, wouldn't not make sense. But I do think it's more likely that they're going to buckle down and capitalize on the 10-year anniversary of Blurryface. Give that album its own celebration. Perhaps do a variety livestream. I hope do a variety livestream like they did for Vessel. Do some kind of exclusive vinyl pressing release for Blurryface, which has some exclusive bonus tracks on it, including the demo for Doubt, and hopefully some more demos. A new or re-released line of merch related to Blurryface, and so on. I think that's what they're going to do next. That will be the next big thing from the band. And then after that, they'll start teasing and getting ready to release the end of the story. Will that come this year? I'm inclined to say yes. I'm inclined to believe right now that the end of the Clancy story will come in this year. And that either then they'll take a hiatus or they'll launch a new leg of the Clancy tour, Clancy Part 2, the end or something. All that is to say, and all that is to discuss this double album theory, this Inferno theory that I've been seeing all over the internet for the past week or so. So, that's that. Leaving that aside, there have been a number of new letters released, similar to the ones which I went through and looked at a couple weeks ago. Those were a compilation of letters which were released at the pop-up FPE exhibit events during the US leg of the Clancy tour. Now they're in the European leg. New letters are appearing, and they're different. They're significant in one regard because many of them are fragments of letters. They're not whole letters. They have to be, the different halves of which have to be found and pieced together. But this all started with this one letter, which I've already discussed in a different video when it first came out, which appears to be written by the torchbearer to Clancy. But just for a refresher, I will read that, and then I'll go through and read the different fragments of letters which have been found so far, at least the ones which I was able to get a hold of online. But in this letter from the torchbearer to Clancy, he writes, "Clancy, never forget the cries of your people. Never forget the raw fear that fueled you, or the dreams that made you who you are today. We are all one. We destroyed them so that we didn't become them. We must do better, Clancy. We must do better. And again, the main significant thing to take away from this letter, besides the cry to Clancy to remember his past and do better than the bishops did, the main key thing in this letter is the implication that the bishops have been destroyed. Which we see here, we destroyed them. I think we can all assume that the them there is the bishops. We destroyed them so that we don't become them. So this one raised questions for me about how time works in DEMA, how the timelines operate, which I discussed in a different video. But it also implies that this was written after the defeat of the bishops and the winning by Clancy and the Banditos of the city of DEMA, the capture of the city on their part, which meant that they now have control and leadership and rulership over the city. Why else would the Torchbearer be calling upon Clancy to do better than the bishops if he didn't have an opportunity to demonstrate how he can do better than the bishops, namely by ruling DEMA as the bishops once did? All right, so that letter I've discussed before in more length. Don't need to dwell on it too much here. But to move on to the next one. Now, I should say, before we launch into these new ones, that I haven't read any of them yet. I just found them, compiled them together, so that I could read through them now for this video. So, with that said, having not read them, I have no idea if they are all completely boring or not. So this could end up being a complete waste of a video. So, I implore you to bear with me as I peruse these and see what I think, what takeaways we can find within them that might tell us more important things about the story. This letter, as I mentioned, is a fragment. It's cut off here at the bottom or torn off, so I won't be able to read all of it, but it's addressed to Magnus. And the author writes, "Magnus, I assume you're back at base. We found a spot on the outer perimeter of DEMA and set up camp here. We arrived thinking we would log the routines of the guards and report back with their schedule. But things are moving fast. Magnus, Clancy has done it. The front line was able to push through the guards while he found a way into the city." Now, this is interesting. This answers somewhat questions which I had after reading through the first batch of letters which we got. Namely, the question that I kept asking was, who are these guards of DEMA, and why haven't we seen them before? Now, this implies that we did see them at the Battle of Paladin Strait, and that the guards are nothing more than the army of the undead, which the bishops are able to summon and send out against the Banditos. But this doesn't totally line up with what we saw in those other letters, because those guards seemed to be living humans, interacting with the other citizens of DEMA, and not some weird specters of the undead who the citizens would naturally fear and loathe. There are two possible explanations for this inconsistency. One, we were wrong to assume what we did about the guards based off of those previous letters, and they are nothing more than hordes of the undead, stationed around the city of DEMA, keeping watch. Or two, the Banditos think that army of the undead are the guards of DEMA. But really, there is another army of guards, as those other letters imply. There is another army of guards sitting ready to launch a counterattack against the Banditos after the Banditos break through the hordes of the undead, or simply just held in reserve somewhere, or shuffled off somewhere. We don't know. We don't know what happened to those other guards, but they could still exist, and this letter doesn't necessarily disprove our original theory about those guards, which doesn't do much to answer the question I had. but does seem to make the most sense to me. That the Benditos don't understand what it is they're looking at. But perhaps the next letter will shed more light on this question. This one is also a fragment, the second half of a letter, and it doesn't appear to be connected to the letter which we were just reading, so not much use there, but let's take a look nonetheless. This one is smaller, so I will have to peer a bit more closely at it in order to interpret what it's saying. Taking all of this something for grain gear, I don't know what that says. Wild hills and caves, more of a retreat. We are ourselves out here, and we would have never found it without them. You defeated that place, and I'm proud of you. Hilt. I assume this letter is addressed to Clancy, since he seems to be the one who is credited with defeating DEMA, defeating that place. And it seems that this is written by perhaps one of the citizens who was still inside DEMA before Clancy came and freed them from that place. Again, implying that the battle has already been fought and won, and that at least some amount of time has elapsed since then, because there has been enough time for people to recoup themselves and move out of the city and write letters, and for those letters to be found. Not much more to glean from this letter, but interesting nonetheless, further solidifying what we saw in the US letters, that the defeat has already taken place, at least at some point in this timeline. All right, let's look at the next letter. Again, another fragment, but the beginning of a letter this time. We don't know the author, but we do know who it's addressed to, Tari. And the anonymous author writes, Tari, I found myself reminiscing about Bishop Nils last night. A long while back, he actually rescued me from falling back through a window while playing tug-of-war in class. He was there, and he caught me. I looked up at him, and the relief in his eyes that I was all right caught me so off guard. In that moment, he cared for me. He wasn't as devoid blank. There was no tension. I assume devoid of emotion or compassion or something like that would have naturally filled in that gap there, but this is interesting. This is another example of a letter which doesn't do all that much to advance the story forward that much, but does give us more of a snapshot and a look into what day-to-day life is like for the citizens of DEMA. They attend some kind of school. They go to class. They play tug-of-war. They're not that different from humans growing up the rest of the world. It's also interesting that the bishops appear to be involved in these day-to-day routines and activities. More so than I think I originally assumed, based off of their cold, aloof demeanor. I'm not sure I have many more thoughts on this letter, as it doesn't tell us all that much. But it is letters like these which are interesting and important to have, particularly for the sake of world building. This next letter is actually two letters which were fragments and which were pieced together by someone online. I'll put the credit for where I found this in the description of this video. It was just a Reddit thread, but all the same. And thanks to that, thanks to the piecing together of this letter, we do know both the author, Soren, and the one to whom the letter was addressed, Carmen. Let's read through this. Carmen. Again, this is written by Soren. We do know that this time. Carmen, I am still here. Thank you for your letter. At times, I feel so isolated in front of that small fire that I forget people are listening. It's usually just me up there, a watcher without a partner, trying to keep myself awake by noodling on this instrument. So I speak to someone, to all of you. I'm glad to know you hear it, and more importantly, that it's important, I think. I'm embarrassed to admit that I fell asleep for a second last night. I was so worried of dozing off again that I didn't play music, just stood at attention all night, looking over the hill. I don't want to miss the signal. I haven't lost faith in the plan, and I know the signal is coming, but some nights it's hard to stay awake. I'll keep playing. Sometime, if you were not too tired, I would love company. 4 eyes are better than 2, and they should give us the sign any day now. Steadfast, Soren. This appears to be written from one bandito to another. And here the banditos are at a watchtower, or a point of watch and observation, looking for a signal. What signal is that? Now, is it the signal which indicates that the banditos have broken through the lines and made it towards a victory over the city of DEMA, over the bishops? A victory towards conquering the city of DEMA? Or is it the signal which we see Tyler and Josh giving and the banditos receiving at the end of the outside? It's hard to say. Given the context of the other letters which we have seen so far, both in the US and the European leg, it seems more likely that it is a signal indicating the defeat of the bishops and the victory of Clancy and the banditos at DEMA, which would indicate that there's another section of the banditos who didn't go forward with the attack, didn't join the others as they attacked, and if not, then the question obviously is why not? They have some kind of plan. What is that plan? Is it to break through the first defenses? Is it to break through enough and get Clancy up in the tower and then set off the signal? And then the second wave of banditos can come and attack while Nico is distracted with Clancy. Perhaps. We don't know. But it does raise interesting and compelling possibilities. Besides that, I'm not sure I found too much more of note in this particular letter, besides the fact that we do have both halves, and that is significant in and of itself. This next one, we do again have both halves of, thanks to the fine work of someone online, who again I will credit. Again, it's just a Reddit post, so you can find it for yourself. And it looks like I'm reading these backwards, that this one is numbered number 1, but let's see if this makes any sense, even reading it backwards, as a prequel letter. So this is what Carmen wrote before the letter we just read from Soren. Soren, for the first time in a long time, I didn't hear your song last night. Something so constant and reliable, I realized that I take it for granted. So much more evident last night when I heard silence. But we need it. Your strings echo out from the valley and hit my tent just right. It's become my serenade in these hills. A reverberation of subtle memory that calms me and lets me know that I am home. I rely on it, and I think we all need it. I'm grateful for scarves to warm my face and coats to insulate me, but this everlasting melody that you send through these mountains, it covers me. It covers all of us. It reminds us who we are and what it means to be free. I hope you're okay, and I hope to hear you play again. So that letter, obviously, provides more context to the one which we just read, and doesn't necessarily give us all that much more information other than the fact that they're situated in a valley. The one who is watching appears to be on the mountain, and the rest of them are encamped either at lower points in the mountain or in the valley itself. Given what we saw in the Trench trilogy and so on, I assume that they're probably encamped at lower points in the mountain, but still in the mountain nonetheless, but perhaps not. But we do know that there are mountains in sight of the city of DEMA, so they could be watching for a signal from DEMA, a sign of victory over the city and the defeat and overthrow of the bishops. If there are other letters which I missed, which have come out, let me know. I will do another one of these videos once there are some more to see, and if there are already more to see. I continue to find these quite fascinating. Sure, they don't necessarily drop huge plot points on us about the story, but they do continue to build up this world of Trench and DEMA to provide more context about who these banditos are and who these citizens of DEMA are. Give us more reason to care about them and root for them in their struggles.